We're really only going to focus on one question with the Bish. Q&A in the weekend, talking lots about housing. We're going to pick it up very quickly where Jack Tame is asking Christopher Bishop if he thinks that national policy has led to more homelessness. This is the only question we're going to look at tonight.
I know the answer to this one. Let's see if
in August, your government tightened up the gateway to emergency housing, and your officials warned at the time about the changes causing an increase in homelessness. Here's what they said, quote, making these changes ahead of significant increases to the supply of affordable housing and more preventative wraparound supports does create a risk of increased levels of rough sleeping, people living in cars and overcrowding. You pushed ahead with those changes anyway. Has changing the emergency housing policy increased homelessness?
I don't believe so. I think it has made the system clearer for everybody to understand. There will always be a need for emergency housing. I want to make that really clear. And for people who need emergency housing, it will always be there.
So you don't believe so? Based on what?
Based on what I see and hear around the place.
And give us some see and hear, that's just anecdotal.
That's like, I can remember a comedian once telling a joke about how society was struggling, and he was like, yeah, apparently the research says that everyone's getting poorer. Yeah, I've never been more rich. So it's basically that level of, what I'm seeing and hearing. No, like all the guys around me in that oval table on the 9th floor, they're all doing well. Their portfolios are looking fine.
Based on what I see and hear around the place.
But give us some data. See and hear, that's just anecdotal. Well, give us some data.
The register was 25,000 when we came in. It's now 20,000.
I understand the register. I understand the register's gone down. I understand the emergency housing's gone down. What about homeless numbers?
Well, there is basically no agreed definition.
This is a really interesting conversation. Sorry to cut in, because for the first kind of quarter of it, you can see this is halfway through the conversation. The Bish almost came across like he was a decent human being. And I think we've heard that sometimes from Kieran. And there's several questions in this conversation where Jack's saying to him, why don't the rest of your cabinet kind of agree with you? You're wanting to do this other thing. Why are they not going to support you in this? Like 3 or 4 times, the themes of that question kind of came up, which was sort of interesting to watch. Although the Bish doesn't really have much of a comeback for, are you causing more homelessness? He's going to have to play that with a pretty straight bat, and he can't.
Of what homelessness is. Okay, there's a Stats New Zealand thing which is done as part of the census every 5 years. Can you
point to any homeless measure, accepting that there's disagreement about how you define homelessness? Can you point to any homeless measure during your time in government that has gone down?
Yes, I've just given you the social housing register and emergency housing. Well, those aren't homeless. Those are hard. That's hard data.
Those are people waiting on a register for a social house. That doesn't suggest that the number of people on the streets has gone down.
There is no government measure that measures homelessness.
Okay,
the ones we have are proxies.
There are Auckland City Council. There are Wellington Council. So yes, but those changes. Hang on a second. Those changes came into.
So therefore, if you can point to literally nothing, even as Jack said, even if there, if you can debate which are the right ones, but if you can point to nothing, how can they make any decisions or any conclusions based around that policy? He can't even say there's much thought about this. One part would say this, one part would say that. We think this. He won't point to anything. No contrary information at all. Just nothing, Chewie.
No, that's all I've got. It's just a very loud noise.
All right.
Council, there are Wellington Council. So yes, but those changes, hang on a second, those changes came into effect at the end of August, right? So between September and January, Auckland Council's community impact team recorded a 53% increase in the number of people living in cars, parks, or the streets. In the 12 months at the end of last year, Wellington data showed rough sleeper numbers increased by...
So this would be Jack pointing to data. Like, even if it's contestable, he's pointing to something. When the Bish, the guy who is making decisions and who is the representative for the government there, will and has pointed to nothing. The journalist, he's pointing to some data.
Streets. In the 12 months at the end of last year, Wellington data showed rough sleeper numbers increased by 1/3. Do you accept that your changes could have contributed to higher numbers of homeless people?
No, because I think when people are in those situations, they should talk to MSD, and there will be housing support available for them. We spend...
He's saying no because there's an answer that hasn't worked yet. No, because they can be not homeless if they choose to be.
They should talk to MSD, and there will be housing support available for them. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars every month on housing support, or tens of millions of dollars every month on hundreds of millions of dollars per year on housing support. There is social housing available. There's emergency. There's transitional
we
housing.
Appreciate that these measures are so. No one's disputing that you've completely torn out all of the social supports that might be available. However, the changes that you introduced, it's pretty clear, have made the gateway to emergency housing much more complicated. So the State of the Nation report from the Salvation Army said that introducing reduction targets and tightening the criteria, the gateway to emergency housing, is likely, quote, a key contributor to the rising street homelessness.
Well, that's their view. We've also made
their view. It's the Auckland Council view. It's the Wellington measure as well.
We've also made it easier to get out. There are now hundreds, thousands of children who were living in emergency housing motels who are now living in warm, dry homes as a result of the changes made by the government.
So this is the critical point.
Children.
So emergency housing before you came in was costing New Zealand more than $300 million a year.
Correct.
Vastly expensive.
$1 million a day.
Yeah. So Tama Pōtaka, your associate minister, says that 80% of those moving out of emergency housing were going to better, more permanent solutions, which is great. But it still leaves 20%, right?
Yes.
And so if the policy settings that you have introduced put 80% of people from emergency housing into better options, but leave 20% of people on the streets, is it worth it?
Well,
it's a great question, because what he's basically asking is that payoff okay with you guys? Is it okay to help the 80% to screw over the bottom 20% even more? It's a really interesting question. It's actually an interesting debate as well. You know, do you help 80% and fuck the 20%, or would that still be seen as a failure? Different political parties would see that differently.
But leave 20% of people on the streets, is it worth it?
Well, I don't think it's correct to say that those 20% are on the streets.
Except that you can't point to any data that actually suggests they aren't. And I can give you numbers from Auckland Council, from Wellington, concerns from the Salvation Army, which suggest the number of people sleeping on the streets.
We don't have trackers on everyone. We're not running a police.
Well, Auckland Council.
Don't tell Winston Peters that. His supporters think there's trackers on everybody. You know, just be aware. Just be aware.
We're not doing that yet.
We're not doing it yet. Good point.
I mean, Auckland Council's community impact team go and get this data all the time. Before you're in government, they got this data. And between September and January of this year, 227 more people were recorded as sleeping on the streets. There's data. You can't give me any.
Well, there's that data, and then there's and
then there's what people are telling you. I mean, this is the thing, right? And maybe it's a payoff that's worth making, especially given the expense, $300 million a year. Emergency housing.
We'll just say this: we've missed you, Jack. Welcome back.
It's a payoff that's worth making, especially given the expense, $300 million a year. Emergency housing, a lot of people have said, was a terrible policy. You've described it as one of the biggest policy failures in New Zealand history. The question is, if the cost of getting all of those people out of emergency housing and into better options is that some fall through the cracks and end up on the streets, is it worth it?
There is always support available for people who are sleeping on the streets, who are sleeping rough, who are sleeping in cars. The government will always provide support for those people. MSD do that each and every day. Emergency housing, as it was before, which was essentially a free-for-all, was a disaster. We have made it harder to get in, but we have also made it easier to get out, which is why we can point to the signs of success. But am I pretending everything's perfect? Absolutely not. Emergency housing is a symptom of our broken and dysfunctional housing market. That's why we are doing all the things around greenfields, around density, around freeing up land. All of those things will flow on to have an impact. It's very important.
So if you call just...
There you go. There's the end of that. I do actually have another one that I wasn't going to play, but maybe we'll, because it's only 60 seconds. But Chewie, first of all, your response?
I'm going to have look. I'm going to start by giving the Bish a compliment. I like that there is one thing that we can tell that is an honest noise that comes out of his mouth, and it's when he knows he's completely fucked. Also, Jack, if you're watching the show, or if any of your team are, I know it's a serious news grill show. Should be classed as a cooking show. Some of these, someone's definitely getting cooked. But when you have someone on the ropes, as much as you do here, you should be able to reach under your desk and pull out one of those little comedy red buttons and just slide it across the desk to your target and say, "Hey, buddy, if you just push this button, this all ends. It's all ends.
Need to tap out.
The show ends. Just go. I admit, I have no idea what I'm talking about."
It's actually that's actually a really interesting idea, Chewie, in a media sense, to actually have the get out of jail card. That would be an amazing thing to see if you can make someone use it.
You know, Where are the people, Bish? I don't know. Just a shrug emoji could have been sitting in that chair for most of it. Like, he even does that thing that I keep on pointing out that the National Party does really well. He identified the problem. The housing market's fucked. That's why they gave all those tax breaks to the to the property owners to solve that problem, right? If this government wanted to solve the problem of homelessness, it could. There are countries around the world that have done that. They went on basically a binge of building essentially supported tiny homes.
Well, hang on. Let's pause there because I'm going to play this last clip. Technically, it played before what we just did, but they were talking a little bit about how many houses are funded by this government. And it's interesting with all the criticisms they had of the last guys and what the last guys were up to and how the last guys have impacted the planning for various policies. They're pretty keen to own the last guy's funding and decisions made for building houses in their term. Have a listen. It's only 60 seconds or so.
The net result this year, how many new state houses will be built in Auckland this year?
Can't remember off the top of my head in terms of Auckland. We've
Why
delivered
would you not know
2,000 in Auckland.
Those are funded under the last government, though.
Yeah, funded under the last government.
So
okay. We'll get to 3,000 by the time of the next election, which was the commitment we gave on the 2023 election.
But when you'll get to 3,000, how many of those are funded by the previous government?
Well,
2,000.
Yes, some of them will be.
Well, there's not really a commitment, is it? I mean, so you said in the last election campaign that you would continue to increase the state public housing stock in Auckland by building new stock at least the current net build rate of 1,000 houses a year.
Yes, and we'll get to 3,000.
But 2,000 were funded under the last government.
Yeah, well, we inherit.
It's not really the spirit of the pledge, is it?
Funding I mean, we inherited funding settings from the previous government. Budget 2023 funneled money into social housing in Auckland and other parts of the country.
Okay.
We took a range of budget savings in budget 2024, but there's
but if you're saying you're going to build 3,000 houses in Auckland,
budget.
and actually you've only funded 1,000 houses, and the previous 2,000 were funded by the last government.
There's an upcoming budget, and there's an upcoming budget in 2026 as well.
Yes.
And as I say, we've got
houses take time to build.
Yeah, that's right. And we've got quite big fundamental changes happening to the social housing system. And it is really important we get that right because the system isn't working.
Okay.
Right? 20,000 people are on the register.
So
there you go. I do like watching wee Jack have a bit of a giggle. Even he knows how ridiculous that is, that they're promising to build 1,000 houses a year. And after the first 3 years, they can take credit for 1,000 if we get there. That's by the end of next year. So technically, last year and this year are on Labour. Next year, they're 1,000 if they get there. Hilarious.
I've said this before. Why would a politician go on Jack's show and not be across such an obvious question of how many state houses have you built in our major metropolitan area? Like, I could forgive it if he went, well, how many social houses have you built in Dunedin? I don't know, Dunedin, all the way tucked down there. Who knows? I know how many I've cancelled. Cancelled a whole bunch of developments in Dunedin. We've still got people sleeping in the Oval, under tents, going into yet another winter. You remember when I went on that crusade last year?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Guess what? It's coming back again. We've still got people living in tents. This is the thing. A government could act with urgency. A government could see this for the emergency that it is. Our housing crisis emergency, people sleeping in cars, was something that we were criticising, not on BHN because it didn't exist at that point, but I was certainly criticising the government way back when it was Paula Bennett and John Key saying there is no housing crisis. People sleep in their cars because they want to.